1.5 to 3 months. That's how much a child of any age loses between the end of the school year and the beginning of the next. And today, with Educate Her Collective, we three educators are going to help you either talk with your child or with your parents on how to make sure that our students don't experience such a big slide. We're going to start with Allison Gollin, a really fantastic social worker. Allison?
Thanks. Hello. So, one of the things that I think about a lot of the time when I'm talking to parents about the summer slide, a lot of times parents come into meetings, and I work with special education students. They come into meetings asking, well, what can I do with my child over the summer? I need to make sure that their academics stay on track, which, yes, absolutely. However, one of the things that I think is the best part is taking the summer to really enjoy the school of life, right? Whether that's as families or with friends, going to museums and learning about different cultures and art, going to a different city and walking around and learning. Washington, D.C. is a great place because all of the museums are free. So that's awesome. Going to the library with your family, listening to audiobooks. If you have a learning disability, Learning Ally is a wonderful website to get access to thousands and thousands of audiobooks. So it doesn't have to be you and your child sitting doing math worksheets for hours and hours at a time. Sometimes with that, I also say to parents, you don't want to have your child doing something incorrectly and have that become the um, muscle that keeps working, because then they're going to have to unlearn it when they get back to school in September. So really reading to your child aloud, going to the library, going to museums, experiencing new things that you've never done before, maybe laying out in your backyard and looking at all of the stars and learning constellations, things like that. And then also, I think kinesthetic learning is so important in the summer. Like, get out there and jump and run and play and learn that way. And I think that is getting the background knowledge that your child needs in order to come back to school and be able to perform in writing and reading and math, but just across all of the subjects. How great is it to have that store of all of those background things that you've done over the summer and be able to bring them into school? So that's what I say.
Allison, to kind of play off of what you said, ever since I heard you say, like, sit and look up at the stars, the math teacher in me is like, oh my gosh, I have a million questions I would start asking my kids. Like, ooh, I think I see 7,042 stars. How many do you see? And trying to get them to think about those bigger numbers, or even any child, any grade needs to work on rounding. Parents, hear this. They don't know how to round. So work on that with them. So you say 7,042 and say, what's that closest to? And work on that, because that could be a fun way to introduce rounding. So that was where my math time went.
Cool. And there are apps for the constellations too, and you can weave both of those things in, the math and the science and the STEM and all of that.
And I was also thinking, Allison, how you mentioned about going to museums. I know that the library in my town has free passes to all the museums in our area. So
Yeah.
check out where you can get in free to these places. There's so many ways to go do things without money. That's how my mom and dad brought us to things growing up, because we didn't have the money to go to things otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then the math teacher and me, we would look at a sign and I'd say, how many years ago was that? And we would stand there and we would do math based on the plaques, or I'd have them read the plaque to me. Maybe not the whole thing, because some of those dinosaur bones, I don't even know how to say correctly. But I would like read with them. If I pointed to a word like lived during, then they would read lived during, because you can do it based on their reading level. So,
Correct.
so much to be had at those places.
I never thought
Wonderful.
about doing the math part of it. That's great.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's so great.
Oh, I always do. I always do because there's dates everywhere, there's numbers everywhere. So I'm constantly looking at that and saying, well, how many years ago was that? Or,
Yeah.
oh, look at this span from 1920 to 1932. How long did this go on for? And,
And I feel like, I mean, we live on the East Coast, right? But from Maine all the way down to Florida, and there's so much history back to the 1600s here.
Mhm.
So that is a really cool thing about where we live.
I'm going to do
Absolutely.
that the next time we
Nature.
go to a museum. Yeah.
Mhm.
there we go. All
Jen, what
right.
were you thinking about the summer?
So I'm going to talk about from a you perspective as a teacher, or from building your relationships with your colleagues. So as a teacher, we are constantly working and we need a break. So this is my challenge for you, so that you can kind of put all of your big ideas in one spot. Take a piece of paper, fold it in half, make this was good about the year, this was bad or needs improvement for the year, and just brain dump. Anytime you start thinking about something, just write it down on one of the two sides. And then after you feel like you've kind of gotten it all out of your system when it's fresh, go back to it. Look at it. Say, well, what are like 3 or 4 things that I really want to remember about 25, 26, so that I remember to do them next year?
Mm.
And then circle 3 or 4 things that, yeah, how can I change this for next year? Because inevitably, March is going to be a hard month. Or inevitably, you might come to school and lose your cool a day. We've all been there. But if you're circling that as something you want to focus on, this summer, take your time when you're thinking and planning for the next year to really focus on where you want to improve. So kind of make that list so it can kind of pop out at you. So you're not thinking about everything. You're focusing on just 3 or 4 things that you want to make better for the next year. But also, it's really important to keep in mind those 3 or 4 things that you did amazing and don't let them go next year.
Mm-hmm. That
So,
positive reflection.
yeah. So do that for yourself. Do that for your co-teaching, especially if you were in a co-teaching relationship. Maybe you want to have a different list for that. What worked well with that teacher if you already know you'll be with them, or what worked well co-teaching, what didn't work so well. What do you want to flip for next year? And I think the most important thing is we've just spent 10 months with all of our colleagues. Some of them you're going to probably talk to a lot over the summer. Some of them you might not talk to at all. But send that quick text. Try and keep those connections. Maybe you started a new connection. There was a new teacher in your building and you started talking, but you haven't really hung out outside of school. Send that text. Check in on them, because maybe that's a relationship you can start slowly building over the summer. So don't forget about that.
I was that was that triggered for me because I've, as a school social worker, been in 3 different buildings, and I remember I didn't really get to know everyone in that building, the second building that I was in, because it was like COVID year. There was just a lot going on. So what I did was, the people that I really enjoyed a lot, I reached out to them and said, "Hey, do you guys want to like maybe get to dinner one night over the summer? That would be so much fun." So we did that, and it was great, because then you get back to school in September and you feel like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I've had some time with people," but just reaching out, and sometimes that's tough, but it goes a long way.
It does.
Mm-hmm.
It does. And Allison, I wanted to piggyback on something that you said about reading out loud to your child. I want to make sure that people realize that reading out loud doesn't stop when the child learns how to read, that we should still be reading to them when they're in middle school. And there are a lot of people that feel uncomfortable reading out loud to their children. So you could get audiobooks for free at the library and listen to them together.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about the idea, Jen, that you said of taking the positives of what you've done in the school year and applying that as a classroom teacher. I would apply it to my own children and to my students. And I teach gifted education. So what do I do all year with my kids? We collect all of the boxes of everyone's recycling and we build arcade games and mini golf. And my daughter is going to be an art teacher. And all year long, she was taking stuff out of recycling and building it. I don't remember what TV show it was, but they wore a gauntlet, some kind of anime growing up. It wasn't Beyblades. And one afternoon, my kids took old gloves that had holes in them and some sequins that I had, and they made gauntlets to match the TV show they were watching. And so when your child builds, let me go back a little bit. It's okay for your kids to be bored. Bored is okay. And they don't need to just
Absolutely.
grab this and do this. So if they do things like make stuff that they've seen in videos, make a sword from Minecraft, cook with your child. You were talking about math, Jen, and my immediate thought was double a recipe or have a recipe. You do fractions with them. And I had never thought about math at a museum, and I'm totally going to do that. I always thought about it with cooking because I cook and I bake a lot. And one of the things that I never realized was important was that I taught my children how to talk to adults, how to talk to other people, because we're seeing in schools that kids don't know how to speak appropriately to each other, to us. And I'm wondering if we're internalizing some of that, and that's why we're not making those connections in the summer. And I feel like it becomes full circle, right? So if you have your child say hello to the cashier, hello to the librarian, answer their questions, you know,
Order in a restaurant.
order for themselves in
So
a restaurant.
important. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And along those lines, we never brought screens ever to a restaurant. I had a bag with books and with art supplies, and I always read to them if they didn't feel like doing art. We thought it was really important that they learn how to talk at dinner because during the week we weren't always eating together because of activities, which is what happens, you know. And just having that connection is so important with your colleagues, with your family, with your prior knowledge so that you do better in school.
Wonderful. These are some great ideas. And honestly, if people just followed one or two of these, I think they would have so much less of that summer slide. Just
Yeah.
take those activities that, you're doing anyway, make them more social, and kind of zone in on how you can make that learning fun. There's so many different ways to do it. And I think the summer slide would decrease a lot if there was less sliding on our
Yes.
phones. So I
Very
think most
much
of us
agree.
are in agreement with that. I know I'm guilty of it as well, but my goal is to limit that time and really focus on how can we have those actual conversations and experiences together. So,
Yeah.
ladies, this has been wonderful. Next month, we have planned for everybody, we're going to talk about PD. So when teachers hear PD, they're like, ugh, PD. So we've all been there, right? We've seen horrible PD, but we're going to talk about how the three of us have some amazing ideas for PD that we could even bring to your school. So
That's right.
stay tuned and check that out. So thank you, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.